I knew something was wrong the moment the ground groaned beneath my boots. You don't forget that sound, not when you grew up on a hillside that once swallowed half a logging road back in '74. But last week, that sound came back loud and angry as an entire row of brand new HOA townhomes slid down my family's land like toys on wet glass. Walls cracked, rooftops folded, and cars vanished into the mud. By sunrise, the damages crossed $10 million. And somehow, they blame me. Never mind that I warned them. Never mind the emails, the survey maps, the notebooks my father left me, the ones that explained exactly why this hillside should never be touched. The HOA ignored all of it. They kept building, kept digging, kept pretending they owned a piece of land that has always belonged to my family. Now the whole neighborhood is looking at me like I pulled the mountain down myself. Before we dive in, drop your city and local time in the comments, and if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. When people talk about family land, they usually mean a backyard with an oak tree and maybe a shed their uncle built drunk one summer. My family's land is different. It's 40 acres of steep hillside granite shelves, stubborn juniper, and underground veins of water that shift like sleeping animals under the soil. My father used to say, "This mountain is alive, son. Treat it like you would a tired old bull. You respect it, you don't poke it." He had learned that the hard way when the landslide of '74 wiped out half his logging road. I was 6, then terrified, hiding behind the cabin door as the earth swallowed trees and rocks like a monster digesting slowly. Dad documented everything after that. He took pictures, measured soil, dug test pits, mapped the veins of moisture that spiderwebbed beneath that hill. He kept notebooks, hundreds of pages of warnings, sketches, and scribbled calculations no county office ever bothered to look at. "Someone will need this after I'm gone," he'd say. Turns out that someone was me. When he passed, the land became mine. I didn't build on it, didn't touch it, didn't try to develop it like every HOA-loving suburban pioneer seems desperate to do these days. I let the mountain rest. I walked it every morning with my coffee, checking the old fault lines like Dad used to. I fixed the fence when elk broke it. I cleared brush so wildfires wouldn't take the cabin. That was enough. And everything might have stayed peaceful if Highland Bluffs HOA hadn't decided my land was their next community expansion project. The first time I heard about them, it was a flyer taped to my mailbox, "New luxury living coming soon." It featured a watercolor sketch of beige townhomes lined across what I instantly recognized as my south slope. I laughed. Honest to God, laughed. I figured they'd simply drawn the boundaries wrong. Happens all the time with these HOAs run by people who think they're real estate gods just because they once won Yard of the Month. But curiosity got me, so I walked down to the HOA's brand new entrance. The sign alone told me everything I needed to know. Polished stone-carved letters, uplighting at night, money poured in from people who needed to feel important. That's where I met her, Karen Maddox. The kind of woman who thinks a clipboard is a weapon. Blonde bob haircut that doesn't move even in windstorms. Sunglasses so big they could double as riot shields. Her first words to me weren't "hello" or "how can I help you?" They were, "Sir, you can't park your truck here. This is HOA-controlled property." I looked at the empty dirt road behind me, then back at her. "Ma'am, this is my driveway." She huffed like I'd insulted her family name. "That's impossible. Our expansion survey clearly marks this road as belonging to Highland Bluffs." "Well," I said, pulling out my deed, "your expansion survey is wrong." Her lips tightened so much they practically disappeared. That was the beginning. Within a week, stakes started showing up on my hill. Thin metal rods with orange tape fluttering like triumphant flags. I followed them, and each one dug deeper into my land than the last. At the top, 2 surveyors were finishing measurements. They had the decency to look uncomfortable when I asked what they were doing. "Just following orders from the HOA board," one of them said. "Orders don't trump ownership," I replied. They didn't argue. They packed up and left, but the damage was done. The HOA had made their move, so I made mine. I sent an email to the HOA's board. Polite, clear, attached with property lines, survey data, and a scanned copy of Dad's original purchase. I even walked a printed packet to their office in person. Karen took it between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "We'll have our legal team review this," she said. Her legal team turned out to be a retired divorce attorney named Bert, who mostly handled disputes about barking dogs. Still, they acted like I was trying to invade their land. 2 days later, construction crews arrived. Bulldozers, earth movers, dump trucks, the whole noisy circus. I ran down the hill as they began scraping off the topsoil where the townhomes were planned to be. The foreman, a muscular guy named Chad with wraparound sunglasses and a goatee that looked like it was glued on, waved me off. "Sir, you can't be here. Active job site." "This is my property," I said, raising my voice over the engine roar. "You're trespassing." He smirked. "Not according to the HOA. That's when my patience snapped. "Well, the HOA doesn't own a damn inch of this hillside. I do. Shut these machines down before someone gets hurt." He didn't shut anything down. But he did call HOA security basically two dads in matching windbreakers who acted like mall cops. They threatened to fine me for interfering with construction. On my own land? I remember laughing loud and sarcastic. "You want to fine me, go ahead. Add it to the stack of illegal actions you're already committing." One of them whispered into his walkie-talkie like he was calling for backup. The whole thing would have been funny if it weren't the first sign of how far they were willing to go. That night I drafted a formal warning. Attached Dad's notebooks, photographs of the '74 landslide, the geotechnical notes, everything. I sent it to the county planning department, the HOA board, even to Chad personally. The next morning I got 2 replies. County received. HOA, please cease hostile behavior toward our community development. We have reviewed your materials and found them unsubstantiated. Unsubstantiated. My father's decades of documentation. Survey maps older than their subdivision. Literal geological warnings. They brushed it off like it was a conspiracy theory, and then the real escalation came. I returned from town one afternoon to find a 10-foot metal fence driven deep into my land, cutting straight across an old path I'd walked since childhood. It wasn't just trespass anymore, it was occupation. A literal attempt to annex my hillside without permission. I yanked the lock. It didn't budge. I rattled the chain until my arm went numb. I even shouted for anyone in the HOA office to come explain themselves. Instead, I got a text message from an unknown number. "Tampering with HOA property will result in legal consequences. You have been warned. HOA property. On my land." That was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with incompetence. I was dealing with arrogance, weaponized, the kind that believes if they act confident enough, everyone else will roll over. Well, they picked the wrong man to roll over. I hired my own surveyor, a seasoned guy named Frank, who'd been measuring land since before Karen figured out how to spell committee. He brought drones, markers, official county maps. After 2 hours, he shook his head. "They're deep into your line, no question. Whoever drew their boundaries used a fake overlay or misregistered coordinates. This wasn't an accident. I asked him to print everything, every angle, every measurement. If this was going to turn into a war, and it clearly was, I needed ammo." Meanwhile, the HOA claimed Frank's results were invalid. They said he wasn't on their approved vendor list. Like I needed their permission to survey my own property. Then came the letter-thick envelope official, looking full of legal jargon. It accused me of obstructing community progress, harassing construction personnel, and spreading misinformation that may endanger residents. They wanted me to stop interfering. Or else. I wrote back one sentence. "If you continue building on my land, you will be held fully liable for what happens next." They should have listened. They didn't. Warnings don't mean much to people who think they're untouchable. And the Highland Bluffs HOA believed exactly that they were too polished, too wealthy, too well-connected to face consequences. So when I told them they were building on unstable land on soil that had a proven history of sliding, they didn't pause. They doubled down. It started with trucks. Each morning, more of them rolled in cement mixers, lumber haulers, survey trucks, with logos no one in the county had ever seen before. They rumbled past my cabin, kicking up dust like a parade celebrating the destruction of my land. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched those machines groan up the slope toward the section the HOA had declared theirs. I had told them the ground there was dangerous. I'd shown them my father's notes and the old topo maps. But when I confronted the construction crew the second time, Chad lifted his sunglasses and gave me the kind of smirk a high school bully gives a freshman. "Sir," he said, "all soil instability concerns have been addressed by our geotechnical consultant." "And who's that?" I asked. He shrugged. "Some outside firm. HOA brought them in. They cleared the site. Said everything's good. Everything's good," I repeated. "On a hillside that literally collapsed 50 years ago. Well," he said, "we don't have records of that. Would you like my records?" He leaned in like he was sharing a secret. Not really. Then he turned away, barking orders at his crew, as if the conversation was over. As if my father's documented warnings were worthless. As if my land and the mountain beneath it would bow to their blueprints. But the mountain doesn't bow. It waits. Over the next few weeks, I became the quiet observer. I documented everything, daily, photos, time-stamped video, the exact position of every new foundation trench they carved into the hillside. I watched them dig deeper, cut retaining walls the wrong way, and bring in fill dirt that soaked up water like a sponge. They were engineering a catastrophe, and they didn't even know it. At least that's what I thought, until I discovered something far worse. One afternoon while walking the ridge, I overheard two workers arguing near the new retaining wall. One of them, a younger guy with mud up to his knees, kicked at the wall in frustration. "This isn't right," he said. "We're supposed to use reinforced concrete here. Where's the steel grid?" Chad's voice shot out from above them. "We're not doing reinforced." HOA said cut costs. Pour it as is. But the plans, I said, pour it. HOA won't approve the extra budget for rebar. Do you want to get paid or not? The worker fell silent. Chad stormed off. I stood behind a cluster of junipers, heart pounding. They were cutting corners on a hill that could kill people if it failed. That night I emailed the county again. I attached photos of the unstable trench cuts and the absence of reinforcement. I even sent a link to a video of Chad bragging to his crew about streamlining construction. The county replied 2 days later, "We are currently reviewing development permits and will respond when possible." That might as well have said, "Good luck, you're on your own." Meanwhile, the HOA pushed even harder to stake their claim. They put up signs declaring the area Phase 2 private property. They patrolled with their so-called security team, two guys who acted like they were auditioning for a cop show. They followed me around whenever I walked near the developing slope, filming me, telling me to leave HOA grounds. One of them, a tall man who looked like he only exercised his index finger scrolling through Facebook arguments, approached me one afternoon. "You're trespassing," he said. I pointed at the ground. "This is my land." He glanced down, then back at me. "The HOA disagrees," I snorted. "The HOA disagrees with reality." He didn't laugh. HOA security rarely laughed. A week later, the real trouble began. It hadn't rained much yet, just a light sprinkle. But that's all it took for the hillside to start whispering. Tiny fissures appeared in the ground, thin as hair, but long enough to make the soil shift under my boots. I recognized the signs instantly. I'd seen them with my father the summer before, the big slide in '74. He had taught me how to read the ground, how to listen to the way it stretched. When the earth begins cracking before rain season, it means it's preparing to move. I captured photos of the fissures and walked straight to the HOA office. Karen was there, of course. She always was perched behind her desk like a queen dictating suburban law. "You again," she sighed, like I was interrupting a manicure. "There are new cracks forming near your construction," I told her. "The soil is shifting. You need to stop the build." She didn't look up. "We've already consulted experts." "What experts? Name one." She shuffled papers. "That isn't your concern. It is when you're building on my land." Her eyes snapped up, sharp and cold. "According to our survey, your survey is forged," I interrupted. "Frank's independent survey shows your boundary line is off by 43 feet. Then Frank's survey is wrong. Frank's survey is accurate to within half an inch." She leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms. "You're making this unnecessarily difficult." "I'm trying to keep people safe," I said. "That hill is unstable. If you keep digging into it, it's going to give way." She gave me a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We believe you are trying to sabotage our community expansion for your own reasons." "What reasons would those be?" "Jealousy," she said calmly. "Bitterness. Maybe even greed." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Greed, lady, I've lived here my entire life. I own this hill. You're the ones trying to steal it." She didn't flinch. "This will be our final conversation on this matter." It wasn't. The cracks grew bigger. The ground sagged in places. Residents started complaining on the HOA Facebook page about strange noises at night, creaking, popping, shifting. One woman said her new driveway had tilted downward by an inch. Another said her garage door wouldn't close anymore because the frame had warped. Chad responded to every post with the same copy-paste message: "Minor soil settling is normal. Our engineering team assures us the site is safe." Safe. They kept using that word like saying it enough times would make it true. But the mountain doesn't care about words. A thunderstorm rolled in late one evening, the first heavy rain of the season. I stepped out on my porch and felt the wind pushing hard against the slope. The sky cracked with white lightning, and the ground under me trembled, not much but enough to make my heart drop. I grabbed my flashlight and hiked up the ridge. Mud was already flowing in thin ribbons. Stones clattered as they loosened. I reached the construction site and saw a long, wide fracture running directly beneath the newly poured foundation of the townhouse row. I tried calling the HOA emergency line. No answer. I tried calling Karen, straight to voicemail. Then I recorded everything, every crack, every shift, every sound of the mountain groaning and warning. By the time I hiked back home, I knew exactly what was coming. No one else did. Not yet. The thing about a mountain is it remembers. It remembers every storm, every drought, every crack in its bones. And as the thunderstorm raged through the night, I felt the land beneath my cabin shifting the way a sleeper rolls in discomfort. The air smelled like wet clay, the kind that clings to boots and refuses to let go. I barely slept pacing the floorboards, listening to the distant groans coming from the ridge. My father used to say the mountain speaks before it moves. And that night it was practically shouting. By sunrise, the rain had eased, leaving the hillside saturated and heavy. Water trickled in thin streams down the slope, and the soil glistened with a sheen that always made me nervous. I grabbed Dad's old waterproof notebook, the one he used to track soil patterns, and headed out, trudging up the familiar path. The mud sucked at my boots like it wanted to pull me down, but I kept climbing. When I reached the crest overlooking the construction zone, I stopped dead in my tracks. The foundation pads the HOA had poured 2 days earlier had actually shifted. The left corners dropped a good 6 inches, tilting the entire slab. One retaining wall had bowed outward like a pot-bellied man leaning over his belt. Thin fractures radiated through the concrete like spiderwebs. They destroyed my land. And worse, they were still trying to build on it. Barely an hour later, the HOA's construction crew returned, as if the storm hadn't happened at all. Trucks rolled in, beeping, grinding, slicing through mud. Chad was the first to step out, barking orders like nothing had gone wrong. "All right, let's brace the south wall," he yelled. "We've got a schedule to keep." I marched toward him, boots sinking into the soft ground. "Are you blind?" I shouted. "Look at the foundation. It's sinking." Chad didn't even turn. "It's settling." Perfectly normal. I grabbed a broken plank lying nearby, stuck its end into the mud, and watched it vanish halfway. "Does that look normal to you?" He glanced down, then shrugged. "We'll reinforce it." "You can't reinforce a sinkhole, you idiot. The whole hill's giving way." He squared up to me close enough. I could smell stale energy drink on his breath. "Sir, step away. You're interfering again." "No," I said louder than intended. "I'm warning you again. This land is unstable." My father spent decades studying these slopes. They slide when the water veins fill up, and last night's storm definitely filled them. He smirked. "Your father was not a licensed geotechnical engineer." "No," I replied, "but he lived through 2 landslides, and he knew this mountain better than anyone in the county." That made him laugh. Not a normal laugh, a mean one, the kind someone uses to make sure bystanders hear it. A few workers looked over, confused but silent, clearly unsure who to believe. But Chad knew exactly what he was doing. He was asserting dominance in the only way men like him know how. "Old man superstition," he said. "This isn't the 70s anymore." I took a breath, slow and deep, trying not to explode. "Your retaining wall is bowing. Your slab is sinking. Your anchors are pulling out. The soil is liquefying under your trucks. Do you even know what soil liquefaction is?" Chad crossed his arms. "Sir, if you don't leave, I'll call HOA security." "Call them," I said. "Call them, call Karen, call the whole damn board. You're about to make the news for all the wrong reasons." But he didn't call anyone. He just turned around and pretended I didn't exist. Fine, I thought. If they wouldn't listen to me, maybe they'd listen to history. That afternoon I went back to the cabin and dug through my father's old metal footlocker. It had rusted at the edges the way his truck had rusted from years of mountain air. Inside, under bundles of rope and an old fishing reel, I found the binder I'd been looking for. It was labeled South Face Land Notes. 1,968, 1,990. I set it on the table and opened it carefully. The pages were yellowed, but the ink was still dark. My father's handwriting was steady and neat, the kind of script schools don't teach anymore. I flipped through the years until I found the entries about the 1,974 slide. There were sketches of the hillside cross-section arrows showing the direction of soil movement, notes about the water pressure under the clay layer. He had mapped the veins of moisture using nothing but intuition and years of walking the land. But Dad wasn't guessing, his notes were meticulous. Springline emerging west side, undercutting unstable slope. Retaining structures must accommodate lateral pressure, avoid shallow footings. Large storm events trigger movement. Pattern repeats every 30-40 years. Every 30 to 40 years. It had been 50. As I read the old notes, something tightened in my chest. My father had left all the answers here long before anyone thought of building luxury townhomes on a hill that hated concrete. He knew what he was warning about. And I had tried to carry that warning forward, but the HOA brushed it away like it was an inconvenience. I took photos of every page. I created a PDF of the entire binder. Then I printed out the most important sketches and highlighted the parts that matched the cracks I'd seen earlier that morning. And then I did something I hadn't done before I went to the county office in person. The receptionist recognized me. "Oh, you're the gentleman who keeps emailing." I nodded. "Yes. And I'm about to make your job very easy." She blinked, unsure whether I was joking. "I need to speak with whoever handles soil stability and unauthorized construction," I said. "That would be Supervisor Grant," she replied. "But I'll wait," I said. I sat in the lobby for nearly an hour before a middle-aged man in a wrinkled shirt finally walked out. He gave me the kind of exhausted look civil workers get when they're about to deal with something complicated. "Are you the landowner from Highland Bluffs?" he asked. "Yes," I said, handing him the packet. "And unless you want the county to be responsible for approving a disaster, I need you to look at these." He skimmed the first page, then frowned. These are detailed. My father documented the entire slope. And the HOA didn't submit any of this. They submitted forged surveys," I said calmly. "Yours truly caught them." He looked horrified. "Forged," I pointed at the packet. "Compare these notes with the photos I took this morning. The slope is moving." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he exhaled long and slow. "I'll need to send someone. Send whoever you want," I said. "But send them now." He sent someone the next morning. A geotechnical inspector arrived with equipment I hadn't seen in years. Ground-penetrating radar, soil pressure devices, even a drone. He flew over the construction area. I watched him carefully, waiting for him to form his own conclusions. After 2 hours, he came down from the ridge with mud on his boots and worry in his eyes. "You were right," he said quietly. "The slope's unstable." "I know. And those foundations, they're already compromised." "I know. And they're building on your land." "I know that too." He looked back toward the HOA development. "This could be a serious issue." "It already is," I replied. "What do you want me to do?" "Report it," I said. "Make it official." He swallowed hard. "And the HOA," I shrugged. "They can keep ignoring me if they want. But they wouldn't be able to ignore the mountain. Not for long." The geotechnical inspector filed his report the next morning. I didn't see it right away, but I didn't need to. The look on his face the day before told me everything. Still, I knew the HOA wouldn't stop just because the county sent a guy with a clipboard and a fancy radar machine. If anything, they'd double down. People like Karen don't retreat, they escalate. Sure enough, by noon I heard shouting from the ridge. I looked outside, and there they were. Karen, in her immaculate white jacket, 2 HOA board members, trailing behind her, and Chad, big sunglasses, big attitude, marching toward the inspector like they were about to arrest him for daring to exist. I climbed the hill slowly, deliberately, making sure my camera was recording. By the time I reached them, Karen was already pointing at the inspector's equipment like it was some kind of weapon. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she demanded. The inspector, a calm, soft-spoken man named Willis, didn't flinch. "Ma'am, I'm following up on a land stability concern that was reported to the county." Reported by him, she snapped, stabbing a finger in my direction. "A hostile individual who has been harassing our community from day one." I folded my arms. "You're building on my land. That tends to make people a bit irritable." Karen ignored me. "We have all the proper permits. We have a valid survey. Everything you see here," she gestured dramatically at the cracked foundations, "is normal settling. This is a new development. You can't expect perfection overnight." Willis raised an eyebrow. "Normal settling doesn't create horizontal shear fractures or visible slab displacement." Chad stepped forward like he was trying to intimidate a man half his size. "Look, buddy, we've got a schedule. We've got investors. We don't have time for scare tactics." Willis calmly packed up his radar device. "This isn't scare tactics. The soil moisture index is elevated beyond safe thresholds. The retaining wall is bowing, and the entire slope is resting on a clay layer that's nearing saturation." Karen's eyes went cold. "We'll be filing a complaint with your department." Willis zipped up his case. "You're welcome to. But the county will be issuing a temporary stop work order until a full geological assessment is completed." Silence. Cold, furious silence. Then Karen's voice cut the air like broken glass. "You can't do that." "I already have," Willis said. "Paperwork goes into effect at noon." Chad exhaled sharply. "This is ridiculous. It's just some cracks." I stepped forward. "The mountain's talking. You'd hear it if you weren't so busy arguing with reality." Karen whipped toward me. This is your fault. You're sabotaging this project, I blinked. You think I climbed the hill last night in a storm and personally shifted the ground with my bare hands. You're trying to block progress, she hissed. You've been against this development from the beginning. No, I corrected. I've been against trespassing forged surveys and ignoring geological facts. Her lips tightened, trembling with controlled rage. We will not be bullied by someone clinging to outdated notes from the 1970s. Willis held up one of Dad's copied sketches. Ma'am, these outdated notes are more accurate than the survey you submitted. That did it. Karen stormed down the hill, red-faced, muttering into her phone. The board members scurried after her like frightened ducks. And Chad? He kicked a clod of wet dirt across the half-sunken foundation like a toddler throwing a tantrum. But the order was official. For now, construction was halted. Except, they didn't actually stop. That evening, when the sun dipped behind the ridge, I saw headlights where headlights shouldn't have been. I grabbed my binoculars and stared across the slope. 2 pickup trucks. No license plates. 4 men, unloading lumber and tools. They moved fast, working under the cover of darkness. They were reinforcing the retaining wall, ignoring the stop work order. I recorded everything, the trucks, the workers, their actions. The next morning I sent the footage to the county. But the HOA spun the story before the county could even get there. At 9 a.m., I received an email from Karen titled, "Urgent Notice of Trespass and Property Damage." I opened it. According to her, I had snuck onto HOA property overnight and tampered with critical structural supports, causing dangerous soil conditions. The night workers, she claimed they were trying to repair damage caused by a hostile landowner. She even attached photos. Photos so obviously staged, they might as well have been screenshots from a soap opera. Broken boards lying in places the workers never touched. Boot tracks that didn't match mine. Even a pile of soil shaped like a small landslide, as if I'd somehow used a bucket to pour dirt down the hill. I laughed out loud, a real bitter laugh. Then I marched down to the HOA office. Karen was waiting with her arms crossed. "I've forwarded the report to the police," she said coldly. "Great," I replied. "I'd like them to see the part where your workers violated a county order last night." "That's false," she snapped. "I have video." She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, a crack in her confidence. Then she sneered. "Your video is probably doctored." I took a step closer. "You think the county inspector is on my payroll, or the geotechnical data, or the weather, or the mountain itself. You are not going to stop this development," she said. "We have investors. We have leverage. We have lawyers. And I have the truth," I replied, "plus 40 years of geological evidence." She slammed her hands on the counter. "This isn't about geology. This is about you being petty, I repeated. You built on my land. You ignored every warning. And now you're trying to frame me because the hill is sliding under your cheap foundations." Her jaw tightened. "Leave, now." I left, but not because she told me to. I left because I saw something out the corner of my eye. A small crack, just inside their lobby. Running along the wall, a crack widening by the hour. I stepped outside and looked at the asphalt road leading into the neighborhood. Another crack, slight, but spreading. The mountain was waking up, and it was running out of patience. By midday the rain returned, not a storm, just a steady drizzle that seeped into the ground like oil into cloth. The hillside darkened as it absorbed water. Small rivulets formed along the path. I walked the ridge, scanning for new signs of movement, and there they were, fresh fractures. Trees leaning at odd angles, soil slumping in slow motion. I knew I needed proof. More than Dad's notes, more than county reports, more than videos. I needed live evidence. So I set up cameras, -3 of them, across different angles of the slope, all pointing at the development. I anchored them into the earth-packed bags of gravel around the bases and connected them to a battery pack. If the mountain moved, the cameras would see it. If the HOA lied, the cameras would expose it. If anything happened, I'd be ready. As I finished securing the last camera, thunder rolled across the valley again. Not from the sky, from the ground. A deep, hollow vibration like a drum being struck from beneath. I froze. The mountain was warning me. I took a step back, then another, because I understood exactly what that sound meant. The slide wasn't coming. It had already begun. The vibration under my boots was faint, just a whisper under the surface, but subtle doesn't mean harmless. On this mountain, subtle means soon. I knelt and set my palm on the earth the way my father taught me. The soil trembled again, barely noticeable unless you knew what you were feeling for. A warning. a breath before the plunge. I backed away quickly, eyes scanning the slope. Nothing dramatic yet, no roaring collapse, no avalanches of mud, but the ground was shifting, breathing, gathering itself. And right below that trembling patch of soil sat the HOA's half-finished row of townhomes. I hurried down the hill faster than was smart for someone on unstable ground. Rocks slid under my boots, mud pulling at my ankles. When I finally reached the bottom, the drizzle had grown into steady rain, making everything slick and heavy. I wiped my brow and looked across the property line toward Highland Bluffs. Their construction site was a mess. Workers were trudging around with planks of wood, waterlogged plans, and long rebar rods they had clearly decided too late to install after all. Chad was shouting at a forklift operator, his voice barely audible over the rain. I approached, but he spotted me immediately. "Oh great, you again," he groaned, stomping toward me like a bull about to charge. "Coming to whine about your precious mountain, I'm coming to warn you," I shouted over the rain. "It's moving." He laughed. Full belly laugh. The kind that would have been funny if it weren't happening on a ticking time bomb. "You've been saying that for weeks." And I was right, I snapped. The county inspector confirmed it. "Your foundations are shifting. The clay layer is saturated. This slope is unstable." "Then you should leave," he said, wiping rain from his sunglasses, which served no purpose in the dark clouded sky. "Before something actually does fall," I stepped closer. "If this hill collapses, your workers could die. Your buildings are going to fold like cardboard." "That's fear-mongering," he barked back. "We're reinforcing everything today. The HOA board approved emergency funds." "Reinforcing," I pointed. "You're hammering rebar into wet mud. That's not reinforcing, that's decorating." He clenched his jaw. "Get off it's my land," I shouted. "This entire section is on the wrong side of the boundary line. You're building illegally." "We'll let the judge decide that," he said. Lightning cracked across the sky, followed by a bone-deep rumble. The hair on my arms rose. The ground beneath us seemed to quiver just for a moment. Chad didn't notice. That was the problem, none of them noticed. Or worse, they noticed, but refused to understand. I left the construction zone, fuming boots, soaked rain dripping from my hat brim. My cameras were still recording from above, each one blinking red like a sentinel in the storm. If things went south, I'd have evidence. When I reached my cabin, I saw headlights pulling up the dirt road. A sheriff's SUV rolled to a stop. Deputy Harper, an older man I'd known since high school, stepped out. He walked up the porch with a tired smile. "Got a call from the HOA," he said. "They're accusing you of harassment again." I exhaled long and slow. "Harassment, I'm trying to stop a disaster." He rubbed his temples. "They said you threatened the crew." I warned the crew. "The slope is unstable. You know my father's history with this land. You've seen the old slide photos." He nodded. "I have. And I know better than to ignore a man who's lived on this mountain longer than the HOA's been alive." That was good, finally, someone with sense. But he added, "I still have to file the report." "Do what you need to," I said. "Just stay close today. Something's coming." His expression darkened. "You think it's happening soon? I think it's happening now." He glanced at the ridge. Rain was falling harder, turning the soil into syrup. "All right," he said. "I'll stick around the area." He drove off and I watched his taillights disappear into the mist. Then I grabbed my binoculars and scanned the hill again. That's when I saw it. A tree, an old juniper, tilted forward, its roots pulling free from the ground, slowly, deliberately, as if something beneath it was gently tugging it downhill. The mountain wasn't waiting anymore. I sprinted to the ridge, lungs, burning boots slipping. I needed the footage from my cameras. I needed angles on everything. The rain blurred the screen. As I checked each unit, still recording, still stable. A crack echoed through the valley. Not thunder. Something breaking. I looked down the slope. The retaining wall, the one Chad insisted was fine, bulged outward so violently that chunks of concrete popped off like loose teeth. A second crack formed next to the first spiderwebbing across the structure. I barely had time to react. The entire wall lurched. The soil behind it surged forward. Then a 10-foot section of the wall exploded outward, sending rocks and debris tumbling downhill. The workers screamed. One dropped his tool and ran. Another jumped off the slab as a piece of rebar shot past him like a spear. Water rushed through the opening in the wall, carving muddy channels. The ground beneath the first townhouse foundation dipped a full foot. And still the HOA had the audacity to call me a liar. I pulled out my phone and called 911. The operator sounded startled. "What's your emergency? The hillside at Highland Bluffs is collapsing," I said. "We need emergency services now. Evacuation immediately." "Sir, are you a resident? I'm the landowner," I said, "and the soil is giving way." She hesitated clearly. The HOA had poisoned the well with their endless complaints about me. But the screaming in the background probably helped. "Emergency units are being dispatched," she finally said. I hung up and kept recording as the hillside shifted again. The first townhouse groaned like a wounded animal. Its far left corner dropped another few inches. Windows shattered. The wooden frame snapped, splintering like broken bones. Workers scrambled to safety as Chad yelled instructions no one could hear or understand. He was panicking now, really panicking, the kind of panic that sets in only when arrogance meets reality. Rain picked up a heavy downpour, pounding the unstable slope. Mud slid in thick waves across the construction site. A fence panel toppled. A parked construction trailer tilted sideways. And then, the mountain inhaled. Everything went still, silent. Even the rain seemed to hush. A long moment passed, too long, too quiet. Then, the world moved. The ground beneath the foundation shifted as one giant mass, like a rug being yanked. The entire slab tilted forward, dragging the walls with it. Wood screamed. Nails tore loose. The townhouse slid 6 feet, then 10, then 20, slow at first, then accelerating. A worker tripped and fell, but Deputy Harper, who had just arrived back at the scene, grabbed him by the collar and pulled him to safety as the structure lurched again. I caught it all on camera, every second, every trembling board, every panicked shout. By the time the movement stopped, the first townhouse was 30 feet downslope, half collapsed, mud piled against its walls. The retaining wall was a ruin. The neighboring slab had fractured down the center, splitting it like a cracked egg. And behind it, more cracks. Deeper, wider. The slide wasn't over. Not even close. But one thing was clear. No one could blame this on me anymore, though they were still going to try. The moment the first townhouse finally scraped to a stop, the entire neighborhood fell into a stunned silence. Workers stared wide-eyed at the hillside, their tools abandoned mid-task. Rain hammered down in sheets, washing mud over collapsed concrete like the mountain was trying to bury the evidence of human stupidity. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then panic erupted. People yelled. Someone cried. A forklift driver tried to reverse away, but the ground under his tires gave way, and he barely jumped out before the machine slid sideways and sank halfway into a newly formed trough of mud. Deputy Harper shouted orders, waving workers back, trying to create distance between them and the crumbling slope. Everybody off the hill moved now, but the HOA board. They acted like none of this was their fault. Karen came stumbling out of her car, drenched head-to-toe mascara running in streaks. She stared in horror at the destroyed foundation, the collapsed retaining wall, the mud swallowing what was supposed to be phase 2 of her precious development. Then naturally she pointed at me. "This is your doing. You caused this. You sabotaged the site." I wiped rain from my face. "Lady, I told you the mountain was unstable. I warned you a dozen times." "Lise," she shrieked, her hair plastered to her head like a wet crow. "You have been interfering from the beginning. You damaged the retaining wall. You tampered with the ground." I stared at her, trying to process the level of delusion required to believe the landowner caused a geological event. "You think I caused a landslide," I said slowly. "With what, my bad attitude? That's enough," she screamed. "I'm calling our lawyer." Deputy Harper stepped between us before I could respond. "Ma'am, step back. Now is not the time," but she shoved past him, waving her phone like a battle flag. "You're all witnesses," she screamed to the workers. "He threatened us. He said something would come for us. He said the mountain was going to kill us. He planned this." Even soaked and trembling, she somehow found a way to make it worse. Meanwhile, the ground behind her groaned again. Not a little groan. A deep, resonant rumble that vibrated the air. Thunder cracked across the sky. The hillside buckled. A massive section of mud, 20 feet wide, sloughed downward, bringing rocks, shrubs, and chunks of concrete with it. It crashed into another foundation slab, flipping it like a playing card. Workers screamed and sprinted toward flatter ground. The HOA board members ran for their cars. Karen froze, staring at the destruction with her mouth hanging open. I grabbed her shoulder and yanked her backward just as the soil beneath her began to shift. "Move," I shouted. "Unless you want to become part of the scenery." She stumbled, horrified, finally running with the others. The slide kept moving slow, unstoppable, like the earth shrugging off a layer of skin. Chunks of the hillside sheared off and tumbled downward, rolling over landscaping stones, burying a stack of lumber, crushing a steel toolbox. The cameras I'd installed above caught everything. Even through the rain, their lenses tracked the movement with perfect clarity, every tree that toppled, every slab that cracked, every person who barely made it out. By the time the slide stopped momentarily, the damage was catastrophic. 3 townhome pads were destroyed. A 4th was tilting dangerously. Half the retaining wall was gone. The road leading to Phase 2 had split down the middle, opening a jagged gap more than a foot wide. And worse cracks were forming farther uphill, creeping toward the main neighborhood. A $10 million disaster in slow motion. But the HOA didn't see that. They saw me. Because Karen wasn't done blaming me. Not even close. Once she was safely downhill, far from the danger but still soaked, she rounded on me again, finger pointed like a weapon. "This," she screamed, over, "the rain is the result of your interference." I wiped mud from my jacket. "How many times do I have to say it? This is a natural landslide. It's geology, not sabotage." "You threatened us," she insisted, voice trembling. "You said something awful would happen. You promised this land would destroy us." "I didn't promise it," I snapped. "I warned you because it's my home, my land, and I know what it can do when idiots poke at it." "You caused this," she whispered fiercely, "because you didn't want us building on your hill." "Exactly," I shouted. "Because it isn't safe." She ignored the logic entirely. She always did. The rain tapered off, leaving a gray haze over the collapsed slope. Emergency vehicles finally arrived, 2 more sheriff's cars, then a fire truck, then an ambulance, just in case anyone was trapped. Thankfully, aside from a few twisted ankles, no one had been seriously hurt. But the damage irreversible. The firefighters roped off the entire hillside and called in more specialists. A search and rescue team set up markers around the sinkholes and unstable edges. Reporters arrived within the hour, local news trucks parking on the street. Reporters standing in the rain with microphones, shouting questions no one could answer. Karen rushed toward them, eager for a spotlight, even while covered in mud. "This man," she said dramatically, pointing at me again. "He's been threatening us for months. His actions caused this collapse." I stared at her, stunned. "You seriously think I triggered a geological landslide?" "What did I do, ma'am?" "Push the mountain with my bare hands." But she doubled down. "He tampered with the soil," she insisted to the cameras. "He destabilized the slope on purpose. He wanted to punish us because he hates the HOA." Every news camera turned toward me. Perfect. Just perfect. Deputy Harper stepped in quickly. "Ma'am, there is no evidence of sabotage." The county was already investigating concerns about unstable ground. But Karen wasn't listening. She kept ranting, almost incoherent with rage. "He sent warnings. He made threats. He said this would happen. That's premeditation." I couldn't hold back a bitter laugh. "You mean I predicted the landslide because I understand my land better than you understand a hairdryer?" Her face turned beet red, her mouth pinched tight. "Arrest him," she yelled at Harper. "He's dangerous." Harper sighed deeply, then turned to me. "I'm sorry, but I need to take an official statement. You're not under arrest, but you need to come with us." "Gladly," I said. "Maybe someone in that building actually listens." Before I left, I checked my camera's live feed. The footage was safe, still being uploaded to the cloud despite the storm. And the cameras caught one more thing, something Karen would not like. 2 of them showed HOA workers on the hillside the night before, violating the stop work order, reinforcing the unstable retaining wall, digging trenches that redirected water under the slab, driving trucks where the soil was weakest. Clear evidence that they, not I, accelerated the slope failure. This time I didn't smile. This time I felt the heavy weight of truth settling on my shoulders. They were going to try to hang me for this. But I had the mountain on my side, and the mountain never lies. The sheriff's station wasn't far, just a 15-minute drive down the winding road that cut through the valley. Deputy Harper drove in silence, the wipers dragging across the windshield in long, tired sweeps. Mud clung to my jeans, my jacket was soaked, and every inch of me smelled like wet earth. I stared out the window as emergency crews swarmed the hill behind us, little flashing red and blue lights growing smaller in the rear view. Finally, Harper spoke. "I'm going to be straight with you," he said. "The HOA board has already flooded our phone lines." "Of course they have," I muttered. "They're accusing you of sabotage, reckless endangerment, intentional property damage." I snorted softly. "Did they also accuse me of summoning the rain? Because I'm talented? But I'm not that talented." Harper's lips twitched in a humorless smile. "They said the collapse happened in the exact area you've been arguing about." "Because that's where the weak layer is," I said. "My father documented it. I showed them everything." "Oh, I know," Harper replied. "And I'm inclined to believe you. But the problem is HOA folks talk loud. And when they panic, they talk fast. That gets people nervous. Let them talk," I said. "I've got evidence." "And that's why I wanted you to come in calmly," he replied. "Gives you a chance to present everything before this becomes a circus." But a circus was exactly what waited for us in the station. As soon as we stepped inside, I saw Karen still soaked, still furious, still trembling with self-importance, standing in the lobby with Chad and 2 other HOA board members. She looked like a disgruntled peacock, feathers ruined by rain, but ego very much intact. "There he is," she shrieked the moment she saw me. "Arrest him immediately." Harper held up a hand. "Ma'am, we are conducting an investigation." "Please let us investigation," she barked. "We already know what happened. He sabotaged our retaining wall. He dug channels to direct water under our foundations." I rubbed my temple. "Lady, the only thing I directed was my patience straight into the trash." She jabbed her finger at me again. "He threatened us. He said the mountain would take care of it." "For God's sake," I snapped, finally losing my cool. That was a geological warning, not a death threat. One of the board members, a thin man with the posture of a frightened meerkat, held up his phone. "We have screenshots of his comments in the community group." "What comments?" I asked. He scrolled, then read dramatically, "The ground won't stay still forever." Chad nodded triumphantly as if that was damning evidence. "See, he basically admitted to planning this." I stared at them. All of them. "You people need therapy," I said plainly. Karen gasped like I'd slapped her. "I will not be spoken to like that." Harper stepped between us again. "Everyone take a breath. Let's hear his side." He led me into an interview room, a small space with 2 chairs, a metal table, and the faint smell of burnt coffee. He closed the door and sat across from me. "All right," he said, "tell me everything. And I mean everything." So I did. I started from the first day I saw their stakes on my property. I told him about the forged survey, the ignored warnings, the stop work order they violated. I showed him the PDF of my father's geological notes, the pictures of the cracks, the video footage of last night's secret construction. Then I handed him my phone. "Everything from the slide is recorded," I said. "Multiple angles, time-stamped." Harper watched the footage in silence. At one point he paused the video to stare at the workers illegally reinforcing the retaining wall, each one caught clearly on camera. He exhaled slowly. "Well," he said, "this just got a lot easier." "You believe me," I said. "I believed you before," he replied. "But now I have documentation." He stood up. "Wait here." I leaned back in the chair, exhausted. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a dull ache in my muscles and a lingering frustration that made my jaw tight. I could hear muffled voices through the thin wall, Karen yelling, Harper countering with something calmer, Chad trying to argue, someone else sobbing. When the door opened again, it wasn't Harper who entered. It was Supervisor Grant from the county. "Good," he said, sounding slightly out of breath. "You're still here. I need your statement as well." "Did you see the footage?" I asked. He nodded, looking grim. "Yes, and it matches what our inspector found. The slope was already unstable, but the HOA's unauthorized work last night made it worse. Much worse. So this wasn't my fault?" I asked. "No," he said. "It was theirs." He sat across from me. "But they're still going to fight it. You know that, right?" I figured, I said. "The good news," he added, "is you're covered legally. You warned them repeatedly. You contacted the county. You documented everything. It's all in writing." I rubbed my eyes. "But they'll still blame me publicly." "That's just optics," Grant said. "Facts are on your side. Facts, the one thing the HOA seemed allergic to." Outside the interview room, voices grew louder, shouting, arguing. Harper opened the door slightly and motioned for me to follow. "You might want to hear this." We stepped into the hall just in time to see Karen pointing at Grant like he'd personally destroyed her entire neighborhood. "You can't possibly be siding with him," she screamed. "We are the victims. We lost property. We lost millions." Grant remained calm. "Miss Maddox, your board violated a county stop work order. You built on land that did not belong to you. You ignored geological warnings. And you submitted forged surveys." "Forged," she screeched. "Our survey was perfectly valid. It had a signature," Grant said, "from a surveyor who retired in 2014. The board members paled. Karen sputtered. "That there must be some mistake." "There is," Grant said. "And it's yours." Chad stepped forward. "You can't pin this on us. The ground was unstable to begin with, and you made it worse," Grant replied. "Your actions accelerated the slide. Your late-night digging redirected water flow. Your added weight on the saturated slope destabilized the retaining wall. This is negligence at best." Karen's face twisted into something ugly. "We are not responsible for natural events. That's the problem." I cut in. "This wasn't just natural." Karen whipped toward me. "You shut up." But I didn't. I stepped forward, voice steady. "I told you about the fault lines. I told you about the water veins. I gave you my father's notes. I sent you emails. I showed you surveys. I warned you the mountain would give way if you kept digging. You threatened us, she spat. I warned you, I corrected, because I wanted you to stop before someone got hurt. She jabbed a finger at me. You just wanted to stop progress. What progress? I shot back. Building luxury townhomes on a landslide zone, endangering workers, faking permits, forging surveys, ignoring county orders. The room went silent. Harper cleared his throat. Ma'am, please step aside. The county is opening an official investigation into the HOA's actions. Karen's voice cracked. How dare you? I am the president of No Grant, interrupted. You were the president. Effective immediately, the county is suspending Highland Bluffs HOA, pending investigation. Your board no longer has legal authority. You could have heard a pin drop. Karen staggered back like someone had struck her. You can't. We can, Grant said, and we just did. Chad's mouth hung open. The board members looked like abandoned children, and for the first time since the whole nightmare began, I felt the weight on my chest ease just slightly. But the relief didn't last, because Grant turned to me and said, "Now we need to talk about what happens next." The words chilled me, because if there's anything worse than a landslide, it's the aftermath. Grant's face told me everything before he even spoke. A landslide might be a natural force, but the legal aftermath, that was an entirely different beast, slow grinding and capable of swallowing a man whole if he wasn't careful. We stepped back into the interview room, leaving the HOA board in a frantic, buzzing panic behind us. I sat down, exhausted mud, still drying on my jacket. Grant stayed standing. There will be litigation, he said bluntly. A lot of it. I figured, I replied. They blame me for everything from the rain to plate tectonics. Grant didn't laugh. He crossed his arms and exhaled through his nose. Property destruction of this scale, $10 million minimum, isn't something the county can ignore. And I warned them, I said, multiple times. Yes, he said, and that's what's going to save you. But we need to get ahead of their narrative. Meaning the HOA board is already trying to spin this. They'll claim you manipulated the slope. They'll claim you interfered with drainage. They'll claim you caused the collapse. I scoffed. They'd probably claim I personally punched the retaining wall if they thought someone would believe it. Grant set a folder on the table. Here's the good news. The engineering team we hired this morning has already reviewed the preliminary data collected by our inspector, and the early findings prove unequivocally that the hill was unstable long before anyone touched it. He slid a few pages toward me. Soil analysis charts, subsurface radar scans, an image showing the saturated clay layer under the slope glowing like a wet sponge. And here, he said, tapping another page, is video evidence of HOA workers violating the stop work order. He clicked his pen. Case closed. Except nothing is ever that simple. He took a breath. But they're still going to try to scapegoat you. Of course they are, I muttered. That's why Grant continued. The county would like to take a formal deposition from you as soon as possible. I rubbed my forehead. Fine. When? As early as tomorrow, I nodded. I'll be here. Grant softened. I know this has been hard on you, but today will be the turning point. Before he left, he paused at the door. For what it's worth, your father was right about that mountain. His notes should have been taken seriously. I didn't know whether to feel vindicated or furious. When Grant stepped out, Harper returned. You're free to go, he said, but brace yourself for what's waiting outside. Reporters, HOA members. Angry people, confused people, some folks who think landslides are political somehow. It's a circus. Fantastic, I muttered. He chuckled sympathetically. I'll escort you out. The moment we walked out of the sheriff's building, microphones were shoved toward my face. Cameras flashed. Voices clamored. Sir, are you responsible for the collapse? Did you damage the retaining wall? Why did you warn the HOA if you didn't intend to cause harm? Did you benefit from the destruction of Phase 2? What do you say to the families who lost their homes? Held up my hand, one at a time. But they didn't want clarity. They wanted drama, heat, a soundbite dripping with conflict. So I gave them something else. I warned the HOA, I said loudly, because my father documented the instability of that hillside for 40 years. I tried to stop this from happening. The county inspector confirmed the land was unstable. The HOA ignored all warnings and even violated a stop work order last night. Cameras clicked furiously. A reporter called out, "Do you have proof?" "Yes," I said. "Multiple angles." "And the county has already reviewed them." That shut them up. Not fully, but enough. Behind the reporters, I spotted two HOA homeowners, everyday residents, not board members. They looked terrified. Mud still clung to their shoes. Their homes were intact, but the fear was real. One woman approached timidly. Is it true?" she asked. "Did Karen really build on your land?" I nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "And is the rest of the neighborhood safe?" I hesitated because the truth was complicated. "Safer than the construction site," I said carefully. "But the geological patterns suggest the whole slope needs to be evaluated." She paled. "Oh, God. I'm sorry," I added gently. "I've tried to get them to stop for months." She nodded shakily and walked away. A black SUV screeched into the parking lot. Karen's stepped-out hair, now blow-dried into stiff curls, makeup reapplied posture, rigid with determination. She marched straight toward the cameras. "This man is lying," she screamed. I sighed. "We have evidence," I said. "I have evidence, too," she said triumphantly, waving a folder filled with what looked like kindergarten-level scribbles and printouts. "This shows that HE was on our property the night before." "Yes," I said, "recording your workers violating county law." Her smile faltered but quickly snapped back. "He knew the slope was unstable. He used that knowledge against us. That's like blaming a meteorologist for predicting a hurricane," I replied. Reporters hid smiles behind their cameras. Karen sputtered. "He threatened us. He told us we'd regret building there. I warned you because it was dangerous." "A threat," she insisted. "A fact," I said calmly. Our back and forth continued until Harper stepped between us. "That's enough," he said firmly. "Step back." But Karen didn't step back. She stepped forward. "He ruined our community," she screamed. "He destroyed everything." "Correction," I said. "You destroyed everything by ignoring a landslide zone." The tension snapped like a brittle twig. Karen lunged. She actually lunged. Harper grabbed her mid-swipe, holding her back as she shrieked and kicked. You, this is all your fault." Cameras captured everything. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Holy hell." And me, I just stood there, expression flat. She wore herself out struggling, and finally froze, chest-heaving, eyes wild. The sheriff's deputies handcuffed her not because of the landslide, but because she'd just tried to assault a man in front of 50 witnesses and 6 news cameras. As they led her away, muddy heels scraping on the asphalt, she twisted to glare at me. "This isn't over," she snarled. I met her eyes. "For your sake," I said quietly, "I hope it is." After they shoved her into the back of the patrol cruiser, the HOA board members panicked. Chad tried to run, literally tried to run, but a deputy stopped him with a single hand on his shoulder. "What's happening?" he demanded. Harper answered him flatly. "County is opening an investigation for fraud, negligence, obstruction, and disobeying a legal order." Chad's bravado deflated instantly. I watched all of them, these people who had treated me like a nuisance, like a problem, like a villain, collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like the mountain exacting payment, and it wasn't done yet. Because the county still needed the complete survey. They still needed to confirm boundaries. And they still needed to decide how to handle the millions of dollars worth of destroyed property. Grant walked over to me after the deputies finished rounding everyone up. "We're not done," he said. "You might want to come to the county office tomorrow morning. We're going to uncover the rest of this mess." "The forged survey?" I asked. "That, and something else." I frowned. "What else?" He glanced back toward the damaged hillside and lowered his voice. "I think we found evidence that the HOA planned more construction on your land. Maybe much more." My chest tightened. "How much more?" Grant breathed out sharply. "Almost the entire south face." Silence stretched between us, heavy as the clouds above. The HOA's greed hadn't just caused a landslide. It had been aiming for a takeover, and we were finally about to expose it. The next morning, the fog clung low to the ground, thick enough that the mountains looked like they were floating above a sea of mist. My boots crunched on gravel as I walked toward the county office, tired but more determined than ever. A landslide may have changed the landscape, but today was about uncovering the man-made disaster behind it. Inside the county building buzzed with an energy I'd never felt before. Phones rang nonstop. Staff members hurried between offices. The landslide had shaken more than just soil. It had shaken political cages, too. Supervisor Grant met me at the front desk, his shirt sleeves rolled up like he'd been fighting paperwork the way firefighters fight flames. "Thanks for coming," he said, gesturing toward a conference room. "We found some things you need to see." I followed him into a room filled with maps, old ones, new ones, digital ones displayed on monitors, and even hand-drawn plats spread across the table. 3 county officials were already seated, along with Willis, the geotechnical inspector. They all looked serious. Grant pointed to the oldest map, first a faded 1968 county plat. "This is the original surveyed boundary of your family's land," he said. I nodded. My father kept the same map in his notes. Then he slid over another map, a newer one. "This," he said, "is the survey the HOA submitted last year." I frowned immediately. The boundary line was wrong, far wrong. It pushed several acres of my land into the HOA's jurisdiction. The south face wasn't just nibbled, they'd taken a whole bite. "This is the forged survey?" I asked quietly. "Correct," Grant said. "Notice the signature." He tapped the corner of the page. "Signed by a surveyor who retired 11 years earlier." I clenched my fists. They had this approved. "Not exactly," Grant replied. "The approval was rushed. Someone at the planning office processed it without verifying the signature. Someone paid. But that wasn't the worst part. Grant pulled out another blueprint, larger, more detailed. "This," he said grimly, "is what the HOA intended to build over the next 5 years. When he unfolded it, the room fell silent. The entire south face of my mountain had been carved into neat blocks, future roads, additional townhomes, a community center, even a parking structure, all of it on my land. All of it based on the forged boundary. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. Willis leaned in. "They didn't just accidentally cross the line. This was planned expansion, intentional overreach, and illegal," Grant added. "Very illegal." Another official chimed in. "We also have emails from the HOA board discussing how to phase out your property line to reduce resistance." I looked up sharply. "Phase out." Grant nodded. "Their plan was simple. Build far enough onto your land that you'd eventually lose the ability to contest it. They wanted to normalize the intrusion." My stomach twisted. "They were going to steal the whole hill," I whispered. "And they likely would have," Grant said, "if the landslide hadn't exposed the falsified permit." I sank into my chair. For months, the HOA had treated me like the problem, like the obstacle in their grand expansion. But now I saw the truth. I wasn't an obstacle. I was a target. Grant folded his hands. "This is why we need your continued cooperation. The county is preparing to press charges against the HOA board fraud, negligence, forgery violation of county orders. And if you choose to, you can pursue civil action as well." I looked at the map again, the bold, careless lines slicing through my family's land. "Oh, I'll pursue it," I said quietly. "I'll pursue every last one of them." Grant nodded. "Before that, there's one more thing." He reached into a folder and pulled out a weathered envelope. The paper was yellowed edges, soft from age. "This was found in the county archive," he said. "It was part of a land classification study from when your father applied for a preservation designation." My breath caught. Preservation. My father never mentioned. Grant slid the document toward me. Inside was a letter written in my father's handwriting. I recognized it instantly. It read, "To whom it may concern, this land is not suitable for development. The south face contains ancient clay strata and seasonal water veins. It must remain untouched. This is not opinion, it is fact evidenced by geological surveys dating back 80 years. For the safety of future generations, I request this land be protected as a historical natural zone." It was signed, dated, notarized. "All these years," I whispered, "he knew someone would try to build on it." Grant nodded. "And the county approved his designation informally. It was never contested. Which means," he tapped the document, "your south face is legally considered a protected landform." I stared at him. "Meaning," he continued, "the HOA never had the right to build there in the first place. Not on the day they bought the adjacent lot, not on the day they forged the survey, not ever." The revelation hit me like cold water. My father had protected the land long before I even understood why he cared so much. His notes, his maps, his warnings, they weren't just memories, they were shields. And the HOA had bulldozed across all of them. "I want to make this official," I said. "Tell me what to sign." Grant smiled faintly. "Already prepared." Over the next hour, I signed affidavits, statements, and authorization forms. The county processed everything with a level of urgency I'd never seen from any bureaucracy. By noon, the suspension of the HOA was upgraded to a full dissolution inquiry. And by early afternoon, the news had already broken online. HOA board under investigation for fraud, illegal construction, forged surveys, and negligence cited in massive landslide. Comments poured in by the thousands. Some residents demanded refunds, some cursed the HOA. Some thanked heaven no one was killed. Others congratulated the mountain man who tried to stop it from the beginning. But the comment that stayed with me was simple: nature doesn't negotiate. The following week brought more scrutiny, more evidence, more county hearings. Karen was indicted on multiple counts, along with Chad and the board members who signed off on the forged documents. Homeowners filed lawsuits, investors backed out, insurance refused to cover the damage. By the time the dust settled metaphorically, since the hillside was still unstable, the HOA was done, dissolved, bankrupt, over. And me, I stood on the ridge at sunset one evening, looking out at the scarred earth. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't peaceful, but it was honest. The mountain had spoken, and it had spoken loudly. I walked the boundary line slowly, boots crunching over gravel and dried mud. When I reached the old cedar tree near the center of the slope, I noticed something, an old metal stake, rusted almost to dust, with my father's name etched faintly at the top. I knelt down. "Thanks," I whispered. Not to the stake, to him, to the mountain, to the truth. And that's when the final decision crystallized in my mind. This land would never again be threatened by greed or shortcuts or HOA paper tyrants. It would be protected legally, permanently, and visibly. I spent the next 2 months converting the south face into a conservation area. With county approval, wooden signposts were installed along the trails. A bench dedicated to my father now sat at the overlook facing the valley. Native grasses were planted. A small plaque explained the geological history of the hill, warning future generations of its instability. Visitors came, hikers, locals, even some former HOA residents who wanted to apologize. I accepted their apologies. Most of them anyway. As for Karen and her board, they faced more than lawsuits. They faced the truth. A truth they had refused to listen to until it came crashing literally onto their dreams. When I look back now, I don't remember the shouting, the accusations, or the chaos. I remember the moment I stood on that ridge, feeling the mountain breathe beneath my boots. Some people see land as profit or as property lines to push and redraw. But real land, living land, carries memory, truth, and warnings for anyone willing to listen. My father taught me that long before HOA politics tried to overwrite nature with paperwork. If there's one lesson I hope people take from this story, it's simple: respect the ground you walk on. Not everything can be controlled. Not everything should be. And sometimes the strongest battles you'll ever fight are the ones where nature stands beside you. Before you go, tell me in the comments what's one thing you've learned from dealing with stubborn people or impossible situations. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more.